Monster Hunter I was a mobile phone game based on Monster Hunter G, released in Japan in 2006. Originally, the game was split across 3 apps, which covered the different fields you could explore and had a 315 yen monthly subscription to play. However, another version of the game would come pre-installed with certain models of sharp phones, Monster Hunter I for SH, offering a few less features, but having all fields accessible in one app, and not requiring a subscription. It was the first Monster Hunter game ever made for mobile phones, but for the longest time was doomed to wallow in obscurity and die out with the aging hardware it was made for. The only way to play it was to spend over £100 importing a sharp phone with it pre-installed. The files for it hadn't or couldn't be dumped, so you couldn't just download the game and emulate it on PC. It was lost, essentially, only being available to a few lucky people who had those phones, for as long as those phones continued to work. But not anymore. XYZ from the Keitai Wiki, an online community dedicated to preserving old Japanese phone games, was finally able to dump the files, saving it from its inevitable fate, and finally making it playable for all. An incredibly important day for the Monster Hunter community, and in preserving its legacy, and I can't thank the community enough for the hard work they put in to acquiring these games to make them playable for all of us. So, now that we can finally play it, the question has to be asked. Should you? How does the game's combat translate to mobile? What is there to experience? And what can you expect if you choose to play the game for yourself? As I said at the start, this game is essentially a mobile port of Monster Hunter G, which was a Japanese-only expansion of the first Monster Hunter. For comparisons in this video though, I opted to play through Monster Hunter Freedom, an expanded version of G released on PSP, because I thought it would be cute to compare two handhelds against each other, and not just because I was too lazy to install an English patch for G, though that was definitely at least 90% of the reason. And the differences start pretty much instantly. There's no character customization, and the hub town is no longer an explorable environment. It's now a map screen, where you can quickly select through all the locations in a series of menus. The town layout is a little different too, and it has an extra shop which uses its own currency, hunter coins, which drop as a reward for hunting large monsters. The shop seems to mostly sell stuff that the item shop did in the original, so I'm not really sure what the point of splitting it up like this is. I can only guess they didn't want you getting some of these items too fast or something like that. There's no multiplayer in this game, so you only have access to village quests, and they work pretty much the same as they did in the original, though they are split up a bit weirdly. Rather than distinct hunter ranks to progress through, some of them are smushed together as a combined rank, and there's 20 of them in total, as opposed to the original game's 5. I guess to make up for the fact there also aren't the multiplayer ranks to go up, they just expanded how many ranks are here. When you're actually in a quest, things seem a bit more familiar. I love the adorably low poly recreations of maps from the original game. They sometimes deviate quite a bit, but for the most part are still pretty recognisable, and I was able to use online guides for gathering points from the PS2 game to help me find stuff here, so they're pretty accurate despite how limited they are. Peep the light rays bursting through the forest canopy, or the thick fog rolling through the jungle. It's shockingly atmospheric at times, especially when the music starts to hit. It really reminds me of an early DS game, or even some 3D GBA games. I can't help but imagine a world where Monster Hunter released like 3 years earlier and would have made a GBA port like this viable. So exploring the fields works pretty much as it does in the original, exploring a map split into smaller areas with loading screens between them, and gathering works the same too, even having bug catching, mining and fishing spots. Even the cooking is here, jingle intact. Things only start getting different again when you're in combat. You don't encounter monsters in the open field here, but in random encounters like a JRPG. The eye icon on screen tells you if you're at risk of running into a monster, and the combat is... honestly, I found it pretty good. Controls wise, I didn't really have any issues. I mean, obviously I'm speaking from experiencing the game on a keyboard, being able to use my left hand for moving and right hand for everything else. Maybe if I was playing on actual hardware I would feel differently. Those square keys look adorable, but they do not look comfortable. But I also can't imagine a control scheme that would work better than this. The directional buttons are for movement, and you double tap a direction to roll. Okay, I lied. The better control scheme would have been one that let me rebind that to a button press. I think every egg drop I had in this game was from me accidentally rolling. 8 and 9 are your 2 attack buttons, so triangle and circle and freedom, though you can't press both at the same time for a third attack. 0 is used to guard, asterisk is sprint, though I ended up rebinding this to 7. Finally, 4 and 6 rotate the camera left and right, and what I was most surprised at, 5 points the camera to the enemy you're closest to, making this the first Monster Hunter game to have a lock-on feature, not being added to the mainline series until Free Ultimate. Hell, if you hold it down, the camera follows the monster, something that wouldn't be in the main games until World. So, kinda surprisingly ahead of its time in some ways. If you walked around Japan in the mid-2000s, you wouldn't have seen a bunch of salarymen on the metro claw-gripping their mobile phones. And the actual combat is fine. I mean, with this control scheme, pretty much every action you could perform in the original game is here, though it does have a little extra stiffness, and double tapping to dodge does take some getting used to. Still, despite that, it didn't take me long to get adjusted, and in some ways, I actually found it easier than the original. The combo for attacking seems to start a bit faster, and it doesn't lunge forward like it's easy to accidentally do in the original, so I found it pretty easy to actually hit the enemies, as opposed to hitting the air next to them like I'm very good at doing in Freedom. I'm sorry, I'm very bad at Freedom. The hitboxes can feel a little wonky at times, but that's just what Monster Hunter was like back then. That's hardly a problem unique to this game. The monster movesets are here too. I was able to use my knowledge and muscle memory of fighting these monsters in the mainline games here. So you can still expect to get jumped on by multiple Velociprey while trying to desperately take out their leader, get slapped around silly by Yian Kutku's tail, and flashbanged by Giusepperos. There's no hotbar to cycle through items here, so to access your inventory mid-fight you have to pause the game. Which is a little fiddly, but not as fiddly as trying to navigate a hotbar would have been with this control scheme, and something I do like about it is that it shows the area effect of items like paintballs and flash bombs, which makes lining up throwing them like this a lot easier. So that's combat in a nutshell. I think honestly the lock-on is like its saving feature. I don't think the game would have been as fun as it is without it. It's a faster paced, even more portable experience. Hunts don't tend to last as long, enemies don't run away to different areas as often, and it's missing a lot of that stiffness and friction the original had. With the faster attack speeds, faster animations for healing and eating so you aren't standing around like a lemon after, and maybe my favourite thing, not having to worry about carving small monsters because here, you just get their drops as loot at the end of the encounter. I love Monster Hunter, but for the life of me, I do not understand why they made it in the early games that small monsters despawn like 5 seconds after they die. It is so frustrating trying to carve stuff in those games, and I'm happy they removed that frustration here. The enemies even have health bars, which isn't something I'd ever want in the mainline games, but I do think they work okay here. For the pace of the game, in a more casual experience, I think it's fine. Is it as fun and satisfying as the original game? No, but I think it gets the job done. It's a lot more faithful than I could ever have imagined it being. So I went into way more detail than I usually would describing how the game plays and controls, and there is a good reason for that. Because I imagine, based on everything I said, lots of you will want to try it for yourself, but I doubt that many of you will after hearing about the very large caveat that comes with playing through this game. You cannot change your weapon or armour, because the game needs to connect to an online server to download the models for new equipment, and the server for it no longer exists. I can only assume this was for file size reasons, though with the game only being 900 kilobytes, I do wonder how much it would have really increased by had they included everything. They wouldn't have done it for no reason, and for whatever that reason was, it now means you're stuck with the starting weapon and armour set. You can see all the weapon types in the shop, and it has pretty much everything you would expect apart from maybe the dual blades. But I hope you like the sword and shield, because that's all you're gonna get to use. You can upgrade them 1 or 2 times, but anything past that would change the model, and thus requires a download. To make matters worse, it seems like it only stores what you have equipped, deleting the files for whatever you're no longer using, so the chances of ever fully recovering all the weapons is not great, to put it lightly. There have been successful early attempts by the community to swap weapons in the same category using fake data, so in the future it might be possible to trick the game into thinking you're connected to the server and use fan-made recreations of the game's equipment. But that's a ways away, and as of right now, this does severely limit how much of the game you can actually play. Maybe a little further than you would have expected, mind you. I was able to reach Hunter rank 8 out of 20, being stopped abruptly in my tracks when all of my attacks would bounce off the Giusepperos, dealing barely any damage. It took me about 8 hours to get there, so it's not an insignificant amount of game by any means. In fact, for a mobile game, that's kind of nuts. There's still a lot to sink your teeth into, but, well, there's a reason I was able to get so far, and it's because the quests are really padded out. Early Monster Hunter quests of this era are always slow and focus a lot on gathering materials and stuff like that, but this game takes that to a whole other level. Pretty much every rank had its own fishing quest. I can remember 2 mushroom gathering quests off the top of my head, and I barely hunted any large monsters. I got to fight 4 of them in my entire playtime, and I could only beat 3. I was able to get so high through the hunter ranks because it was basically asking me to do the same thing in all of them, fighting the same monsters in rank 8 as I was in rank 2. Hell, Hunter rank 5 and 6 had 2 Genprey quests. Is it Genprey or Genprey? I'm gonna leave both in so I can annoy everyone. 1 to kill 3 of them, and 1 to kill 8. Like, why? I noticed that compared to the original game's quests, it skips past the Cephadrome, and on wiki entries for this version of Monster Hunter I, it's noticed that it does have less content than the full version, though doesn't go into any detail as to what is exactly missing. So I do have to wonder if in the full free app version, it might have had a better quest structure with more large monsters to fight. The full game is only meant to be missing Keizu and Fatalis, so I do wonder if it's any different here, but obviously, unable to get past Hunter rank 8, I can't confirm that for myself. Of course, with all that said, I think even with these padded out quests, the game still could have been fun, if you could use them as an opportunity to stock up on supplies and materials for future fights, especially as clearing all quests in a rank doesn't progress you forwards. You need a certain amount of hunter points to rank up, leading me to farming some hunts like 8 times in a row just to get enough points to rank up. But if I was able to use those materials to make new weapons and armour, I don't think I would have even minded that much, but obviously I can't. As it stands right now, you're doing all the frustration and tedium of grinding without any of the benefit. So that's where I tapped out. Gisepperos defeated me. I'm sure a more determined player could push a little further than this. With enough gathering, you could make armor and demon drug potions to increase your attack and defense, and with enough money farming, you could buy the armor and power charms to do the same thing. But I am not that player. I did try to gather materials to make those potions, but the language barrier makes it pretty hard to tell what you're gathering a lot of the time, translating many items into different words than what the official translation uses, making about half the stuff I pick up be completely meaningless to me. Also, some translation software really struggles with the font, making up complete nonsense sometimes. Like, this is a game about hunting monsters, not hunting for a jail sentence. This problem with the translation is also really annoying when trying to sort through your box. The items here don't have icons like in the original game, so you can't even use that to try and, get a ballpark estimate of what you're hovering over. You really do need to translate each and every thing, and even then it might just spit out a name that means nothing to you. Even pushing this far was a bit of a struggle, but I'm happy that I did and that I got to experience as much of the game as I did. Whether or not what is on offer here is worth it to you is obviously up to you, but if those fan-made workarounds for equipping other weapons and armour do pan out, I'll definitely be back to check it out more. This wasn't the only Monster Hunter mobile game released around this era, though as far as I'm aware this is the only one that has been dumped and is playable right now. The others are even more obscure than this. There's a lot of cute looking spin-offs, but also a sequel to Monster Hunter I released in 2009, Monster Hunter Mobile, which looks like an insane technical leap over the first game. I think it looks awesome. It seems to be based on the second generation of Monster Hunter, and I genuinely don't think any footage of this game exists online. I can only find screenshots. Just like the original Monster Hunter I, it also had a subscription fee, so God knows if it would even be accessible nowadays if it was found, but I really, really hope it is one day, because I think it looks incredible. That's Monster Hunter I for SH then, a cute scaled back port of the original Monster Hunter generation, which sadly has most of its content inaccessible because of the lack of weapon upgrades. I hope you enjoyed this little deep dive into it, and if you do decide to check it out, be sure to look at the Keitai Wiki and their Discord server for the game's files and information on how to set up the emulator for it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.